10 Women Who Killed Their Families. Welcome to Creepshow, where we delve into the darkest corners of true crime and uncover the chilling stories that most people dare not speak of. Today, we're exploring a harrowing topic: women who shockingly turned against their own families. These are the stories of mothers who committed the unthinkable, driven by unimaginable motives. As we unravel these disturbing tales, prepare yourself for a journey into the minds of those who crossed the line between love and horror. Now, let's begin. Number 10. Aubrianne Moore. She kept her kids home from school since the news predicted a school bus accident. She avoided meals because she thought it was poisoned. She stayed up all night convinced someone was outside, ready to break into her home. Single mother Aubrianne Moore had psychosis. She had 3 children: Elena, 2, Cassidy, 6, and Kyrie, 8. In probate court, Newaygo County, Michigan. Social workers said Aubrianne would soon hurt herself or others and should be sent to a mental institution. On February 18, 2019, Aubrianne shot and killed her 3 children before shooting herself. After removing the kids from school with a phony doctor's note, Aubrianne brought them to lunch and then to her great-grandmother's highly wooded property. She took each child into the woods and shot them with a hunting rifle. She drove to her boyfriend's place with the bodies in her car. She shot herself in his driveway. Aubrianne had been hospitalized for mental illness and diagnosed with unspecified schizophrenia. Family members say they were trying to remove the children from their mother, but Child Protective Services was not involved. She probably didn't take her medication and had a mental break, which led to her awful crimes. Number 9. Ethel Geller Yeldem. Ethel Geller Yeldem took her 7 children from her second marriage into town for a group shot on May 6, 1930. She then showered and put them to bed. She then shot them in the heart one by one before shooting herself. "I am so tired. I can't go on," Ethel said in her suicide letter to her 3 remaining children from her first marriage. She was thought to be trying to maintain herself and the children while her husband was in the Ohio State Penitentiary. Ethel was alive when police arrived at the grisly scene. After treating the wound below the heart, she was transferred to the city prison for trial. She died abruptly 9 days later from a brain clot, according to the coroner. Number 8. Jenny and Sarah Hart. Political rallies and festivals made the Hart family famous in their area. A viral photo of their son Devante emotionally hugging a cop during a police violence march after Michael Brown's 2014 shooting went viral. The lesbian couple adopted 6 children and homeschooled them, but behind closed doors, they were totally different. The Hart family faced child abuse charges for nearly a decade. Jennifer and Sarah moved the family from state to state to avoid neighbors who called child services and removed them from school after one child reported abuse to a teacher, resulting in Sarah being charged with malicious punishment of a child and misdemeanor domestic assault. A social worker visited the family in March 2018, days before an unplanned journey to California that led to their deaths, to check on their living circumstances after new abuse claims surfaced. Police believe this is why the family ended up in Mendocino, California, where they died. Jennifer drove the family's SUV off a cliff without hesitation, dropping almost 30 meters, 100 feet, to a rocky seashore below. Sarah was in the passenger seat and all 6 kids were in the rear. Jennifer had a 102 blood alcohol level, while Sarah and 2 children had a lot of Benadryl in their systems, according to a toxicology study. No one was wearing a seatbelt. Jessica, Sarah, Marcus, Jeremiah, and Abigail were located in and around the car after the crash. Devante, Hannah, and Sierra, their other 3 children, were missing. Sierra's body was located in the ocean near the crash site a week later, and investigators thought Devante and Hannah were still alive. However, Hannah's partial remains found near the crash site 10 months later confirmed her death and dashed hopes that Devante had survived. Devante's remains are unknown. Number 7. Emma Cooper. After having her last child, Emma Cooper's life was difficult. She suffered from long bouts of insanity, and her husband was unemployed, forcing them to struggle to support their 6 children. But one night in June 1908, Emma intended to treat her family to a spectacular vaudeville concert at Cadillac's Alamo Theater, unaware that it might be their last. When the ticket seller explained this was the only time the family could get in for 50 cents, Mrs. Cooper said, "You will never need to again, because none of us will ever come here after tonight." They never returned. Emma drugged her family with chloroform and shot them in the head in their sleep after returning home. Same way, she shot herself. Fred, her son, survived the attack, but only remembered hearing a revolver and waking up in the hospital. He died soon after. Number 6. Rachel David. The 1970s lives of Emmanuel and Rachel David and their 7 children was odd. The staff at a 90-a-night luxury hotel in Salt Lake City, Utah, said they never saw Mr. David go to work. Instead of eating in the hotel restaurant, the family ordered room service and takeout and homeschooled their children, whom the staff rarely saw. Emmanuel David believed he was God. Since Mr. David paid their lodging price each day with a $100 bill and the family stayed to themselves, no one questioned them. They just believed they were an overly pious, reclusive family. Before dumping herself over in August 1978, Mrs. David threw her 7 children out the 11th-story balcony. All except one child, Rachel, a teenage female, died from fall injuries. Lower witnesses stated the older children were more eager to go, while the younger children resisted and clung to the balcony bars, forcing Mrs. David to remove their hands. After the children were pushed, witnesses asked Mrs. David to leap, so she did. Emmanuel David killed himself by pumping exhaust into his truck days before the murder-suicide. Family of David cult leader was investigated for wire fraud. His brother, also a cultist, believes the family was lost without Emmanuel and didn't know how to continue. Mrs. David's motive for killing herself and her children is unknown. Rachel David, the daughter who survived the fall, lives with her uncle in Aurora, Colorado, following her father's cult principles. Number 5. Judith Kirby. Judy Kirby, depressed and suicidal, turned onto the wrong-way ramp of Indiana State Road 67 without hesitation on March 25, 2000, and drove for nearly 3.2 kilometers to Emissouri at 160 km/h, 100 mph, before hitting a 4-person minivan head-on. Rescuers and police personnel stated it was one of the worst incidents they had ever seen. 3 of her children and a nephew in her car, and a father and 2 daughters in the minivan, were severely injured. Somehow, Kirby survived. There were several theories on why Judy caused the crash that killed 7. Her relatives reported she had relationship troubles and postpartum depression since her youngest was born 5 months earlier. Her defense attorney claimed an undiagnosed thyroid issue caused her emotional anguish. Judy Kirby was sentenced to 215 years in jail for 7 murders, 4 neglects of a dependent, and 1 aggravated battery. Number 4. Kepley McAninch Alma May. Mrs. McAninch broke a breech-loading shotgun, removed the spent shell, reloaded it, placed it between each sleeping child's eyes, and pulled the trigger to kill 5 of her children. She shot herself to finish. Her 2 oldest children, who had gone out on Halloween, found the decrepit scene and a suicide letter from their mother saying, "I have stood all I can take." They later said they were saved because she ran out of ammo to shoot them. The Polk County, Iowa, jail kept Mr. McAninch overnight for an inquiry into small offenses with his brother the night of the murders. After being liberated, he saw his sons and learned about his family. He said he was worried since his wife had been emotionally unstable for a while. Mrs. McAninch and her children were buried in a big burial in November 1937. Number 3. Tracey Shaw. Screaming, "My babies! I have babies!" On December 23, 1994, Tracey Shaw stood outside her Philadelphia row house with her 5-month-old kid as flames overtook it. She had her 4 children, Katria, Jera, Sean, and Mary, and 2 babysitters, Inez and Linda. They died from smoke and soot inhalation. At her hearing, former lover Andre Broggins claimed that Shaw threatened to destroy her house and kill her children if he left. He said she sprayed lighter fluid on the ground and indicated a match was all that was missing. Shaw refuted this, claiming Broggins ignited the fire in rage at being evicted. Shaw was convicted of 6 first-degree murders and sentenced to 6 life sentences after the jury rejected this defense. Surprisingly, Ronald Holman, the father of Sean, 4, and Mary, 2, his children with Tracey, who died in the fire, gives her money each month in prison. He loves Tracey and wants the real arsonist and killer caught for their children. Shaw still reaches out to friends and relatives to reverse her conviction despite running out of appeals and money. Number 2. Elizabeth Gregor. On a warm night in June 1963, Elizabeth Gregor told the Butler County, Pennsylvania, coroner, "You'll see when you get here," before shooting herself with a 12-gauge shotgun. Earlier that day, she shot Joseph Jr., 14, Thomas, 12, and Rosemary, 10, while watching TV, then her 19-month-old twins, Richard and James, in their cribs. She summoned her husband Joseph to come home, claiming a child was sick. She shot and killed him entering the house. The Gregors' little village was shaken by the incident. The neighbors thought Elizabeth was sweet and didn't know anything was wrong. Elizabeth had been treated for a nervous condition, and police found letters written by Gregor revealing that she had been planning the killings for weeks. However, a neighbor who had spoken with her on the phone earlier that morning said that Mrs. Gregor seemed fine and not in distress, making the day's outcome even more shocking and horrific. Number 1. Frances Newton. The Newton family killings were debated till the end. Frances Newton placed a gun-filled duffel bag at an abandoned house near to her cousins on April 7, 1987. Newton's husband, Adrian, was found dead behind the living room couch when they arrived. Her 2 children died in bed. All were shot. Newton was suspected immediately. Her marriage was troubled. Adrian became addicted to drugs after their adulterous relationships. She also took out $100,000 life insurance policies on Adrian and their youngest daughter, which authorities said was the major motive for the murders. Investigators said the gun she stashed was the murder weapon. Newton didn't have gunpowder on her hands or clothing, and 2 similar firearms were found in her apartment. Newton's court-appointed trial attorney did not investigate Adrian's brother's assertion that he and Adrian owed a drug dealer $1,500. Newton always claimed innocence. She appealed her case multiple times, even hours before her lethal injection, alleging her trial attorneys were incompetent and that evidence was lost. Her clothing was stored with the victim's bloody garments, preventing retesting. She always lost appeals. First black woman executed on death row in Texas since the Civil War was Frances Newton on September 14, 2005. Thank you for joining us on this unsettling exploration into some of the most chilling cases of familial murder. If you found this video intriguing, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of Creepshow. Have a topic you'd like us to cover? Drop it in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep your lights on, because you never know what's lurking in the shadows. Goodbye for now.